Welcome back. So we have completed three sections, and now we will be talking about the section 4. In this section, we will talk about the security and compliance. So security and compliance is a very important topic from the perspective that it's a different set of ways of thinking that how you can establish security, how you can have compliance from the perspective of being in the cloud. Although in terms of the overall weightage of the topic in the exam, it's relatively low. Having said that, since we have already covered more than 70% of weightage of exam in unit 1, 2, 3, so this section, which is section 4, comprises of almost 17.5% of the overall exam weightage. But then in general, this is one of the great topic to learn and make your interest develop into. So in this topic or in this section, we will talk about the details of the cloud security, identity, and privacy. We will see how the cloud security works, and we will also talk about the identity and the privacy management for the cloud environment. So with that, let's begin the journey of this topic, which is security and compliance in the cloud. So if you see the public cloud, right? So if you deeply see the public cloud, so public cloud computing basically means that you have sharing of resources, you are using internet, you are having multi-tenancy, you are having a mix of free and non-free services, and you are storing your data anywhere in the world, right? You're trying to deal with anonymous customers, you have unclear SLAs, you might have many technical standards, right? So when you are thinking of having public cloud in the light of these elements, certainly security become almost the most important thing, right? So security has to be the highest priority in this kind of case. Specifically, when you think that it is a public cloud, you as a customer should be thinking of the security of the public cloud. So if you see in 2018, uh, the introduction of European General Data Protection and Regulation Law, which is GDPR, it possesses an extra incentive to pay attention on the privacy and data protection. So huge penalties have been imposed for lack of proper handling of personal data. So most of the time, your private cloud computing solutions bypass some of these challenges. So some of the time, these challenges are bypassed by the cloud providers. So that is that so that results into that results into having even the challenges being more, right? So for instance, the challenges of storing the data location, where the data would be stored, and what would be the age, what would be the location where it would be. So all these information are quite a challenging aspect when you're trying to put things onto the cloud, right? So by realizing that security risks, customers can always assess the perspective service provider, and they can choose the services that will not compromise their overall compliance with the legislation and regulation. So it is always the case that the cloud security is still a ongoing topic. It's still a growing and hot topic because security is changing, ever changing element in cloud as well, right? So if you see the modern enterprise cloud development and the introduction of GDPR has resulted into enhancing and trying to take the cloud security to a more mature level quickly, right? So if you try to rightly see how it works out, many experts they claim that the cloud inevitably try to bring the security risks, right? So obviously, is it clear that which kind of risks which it brings out? We don't know. So in many cases, the claimed risk of only claimed risks are only prevalent for the public clouds, because public cloud you share the environment, and you are on the sharing basis. not in private cloud, because when you are having a private cloud, you can always secure the you can always secure the infrastructure where you are hosting or you are putting your private cloud. So by definition, if you see, the private cloud must address the security risks, and they are absolutely more secure. So because in private cloud, most of the time you are going to put your sensitive and your personal data. So your private cloud is bound to be secure, and you should put a high measure of security in that, right? But we also need to think that, how the security can be enabled in the likes of public cloud environment as well, right? So you need to think the kind of model by which you can define the security, right? So there are few steps. The steps are meant for assessing the security areas of the cloud, right? So first and foremost, you need to define which cloud deployment model you want to go for, right? Whether it's a public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud. So you should access, or you should assess that, which cloud model you want to go for, and then you try to evaluate those things very due diligently, right? So the required due diligence has to be carried out for each of the cloud deployment model. Next is define this deployment model with the help of specific characteristics within your business, right? So suppose you have chosen any type of a cloud deployment model, suppose say public cloud or hybrid cloud, right? Try to see it from your perspective of business, right? So suppose if you are a financial sector, so there has to be an additional controls which has to be put across for the financial sector. Similarly, you need to determine which part of your deployment model is currently being put up on a public cloud. And you also need to think like, which part of your deployment model is put up on a private cloud. So all these questions need to be looked upon, like, how your cloud topologies or future is being worked upon when you are referring to the cloud ways of working. And then you need to determine which setup is used for your, I say, private cloud. So let's talk about overview of security and compliance in cloud. So in cloud, when we refer to the overall security, so we need to understand that how we measure the risk, what are the elements of risks which are there specifically in terms of security when we try to look into it from that perspective. So let's try to look for all the risks which are associated with the virtual environment. So we need to evaluate all the risks for the virtual environment, and then try to put the measures in place from the perspective of how we can control the authentication, how we can ensure the right access management being there, how we can ensure the right set of authorization, or right set of authorization being there. So by measuring the risks and putting the right set of control and compliances, we can enhance the elements of security in the overall cloud. Deployment models which you are trying to use. So when you have the when you have to identify any kind of hybrid cloud, so you need to focus on the different cloud models, that how they will connect and how the security will work for these kind of things. So these are the important elements which has to be thought of.